actually doing this. I'm nervous. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Hey guys, I'm Sabrina, and today I'm going to be doing a book review for An Ember in the Ashes, A Torch Against the Night, and A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. So I've already posted a video kind of like this, but it was really just me fucking around, not getting this book review right. So we're gonna try it again. This is probably my 5th time recording this kind of video in the past 5 months, so hopefully this will go as planned, but who knows. I can already tell this is going to be very chaotic, very scrambled. My thoughts are probably not going to make sense, so I apologize for that, but I want to talk about this book with you guys because it is one of my favorite book series, the first young adult fantasy series that I've ever read. I hold a lot of nostalgia for it. Despite that nostalgia, it's still a really, really good book series. I have read these books 3 times and I love them every single time I read them. I love them even more. I don't know if that made sense. We'll keep going with it. Anyways, disclaimer, this will be full of spoilers, so if you're here for a spoiler-free review, you came to the wrong place. I'm sorry. Just know that if you haven't picked up this book series yet, you should, because it is fantastic. I love it. Very complex world, very sad, a lot of trigger warnings, so I will leave them down in the description box below if you're wondering what they are. Okay, I don't know what else to say in this intro, so let's just get started. So synopsis for book 1, An Ember in the Ashes. It follows our 2 main characters, Laia and Elias. They both live in the Empire. Laia is a scholar, which are the oppressed, and Elias is a marshal, which are the oppressors. And in the beginning of the book, Laia's brother is arrested for treason, and she has to go out and try to find a way to get him back because he's her only family, and this leads her to become the spy for the Commandant of the Empire's military academy called Black Cliff Academy, where Elias attends. Their paths cross, and a lot of sad and great things happen. Definitely go read it if you're still here for the non-spoilery bits. So yeah. Okay, peace out, non-spoilery people. Okay, spoilery people. Let's talk about characters in this book first. Within this book, let's talk about Laia first. Laia, she is great. I love that she's not your typical main protagonist in a fantasy setting. She's very realistic in a sense where she's plunged into this situation and she just wants to save her brother. You know, she doesn't really go into like the whole becoming a spy to save the scholars. You know, she doesn't go into that situation with that mindset. She only comes to the conclusion after she saves her brother and she understands how much she could change for her people. She's a character who makes mistakes and I love it. She's just fantastic. Moving on to Elias. Elias, sad boy. He's great. I love him so much. The perfect man doesn't exist. Excuse me, Elias Victorious is here. I honestly love the complexity with this character. You know, he's this person who doesn't want to do all these things, but then he's forced to, and it makes him feel like trash. And, you know, at the end of this book, we just love the development that he goes through. I love it. I honestly don't really know what else to say about Elias, so yeah. Moving on to side characters within this book. Helene, she kind of isn't really my favorite in this first book, honestly, maybe because she's a side character. I just didn't really vibe with her in this book, but we'll talk about her in the other 2 books. Next up, Kiris, the Commandant. Fucking scary as heck. What the hell? I feel like she's such a well-written character and she's so scary, so terrifying. Every scene that the characters are with Kiris, I am screaming inside because she's so terrifying, but she's also a bitch. Next up, Marcus and Zach. I feel like I can kind of pair them together. Marcus, asshole, but I can see the complexity there with his character because after Zach dies, we kind of see this more of like an inner layer towards Marcus, but it really doesn't excuse him for all the shit things that he's done. And Zach, I wrote something in the book about how I didn't understand why Zach was pinned with the same disdain as Marcus, but then once the scene where Marcus attacks Laia, I understood, because Zach is there and he sees this whole thing, but then he walks away, and so he's allowing this to happen. He's allowing his brother to do this, and that's not okay. So that's why I understand why Zach is pinned with the same disdain as Marcus. Other side characters, Demetrius, I love him so much. So sad he died. Honestly though, his only character trait in this book was being sad about his brother. But despite that, he was still one of my favorite side characters, because we have our side characters, but then we have those like side characters, and he was one of my favorites. We have the cook, very mysterious in this book, but also very wise, and I like that she's kind of this no bullshit character and very logical. We love that. Next up, Izzy. Felt like Izzy was only kind of there to help Elia, didn't really have like a lot more that made her interesting to me. Keenan, I fucking hate Keenan, and honestly I don't remember how I felt about him the first time I read this, because now every time I read this book I hate his guts so much. He's a fucking asshole. I hate him. I hate him. No words to explain it. He's disgusting. I hate him. I think that's it for side characters that I want to talk about. Let's talk about the romance. Romance in here. I will say that the first time I read this, I was really shipping Laia and Elias, as we all do, as you all should. Then with my second reread, I was shipping Elias and Helene a little bit more because I had grown a taste for friends to lovers, and you know, they were friends to lovers, or not really, but I really wanted that, I guess. So I was really kind of shipping them together. But then this third time, I do ship Laia and Elias more, but not as hardcore as I did the first time. And this one, I can see that it's built on a little bit of lust, because they're both characters who are really broken and they don't really have anyone to confide with and to really express their feelings. And so I feel like with each other they kind of like sense this spark, but then, you know, like even when they were in Elias's room that one night, I felt everything that built up to that kiss was lust, because even Laia was like what about Keenan? But then she's like, Elias is here, let's just kiss him, you know? Hot man, you gotta kiss him. So definitely based on lust, but then I felt like within that scene and those hours of getting to know each other, they get rid of this idea of each other and they really start to get to like the real substance of each other. I'll talk more in depth about their relationship later on. Keenan and Laia, annoying, I don't like it. Just, yeah, no for me. And then again on Helene and Elias, I feel like Elias's attraction towards Helene is built on comfort. Helene's always been there for Elias, and so he's like, okay, you know, I feel comfortable, maybe, like we'll see. And also he kind of is using her. So I don't know how that really goes. I like that it didn't really turn into like this like love triangle sort of thing. I mean, it kind of did, which is annoying. So let's jump into the plot, writing, other aspects of this book. I will have to say the beginning part, which is part 1, and that is the raid. A little bit boring, but it really sets up the world that we're going into for this first book really well, because that's when we're introduced to the trials and to Laia becoming a spy for the Commandant. This book made me feel absolutely euphoric. I love it so much. The writing I really love. It's so beautiful, and I love it because it's beautiful and it does add something. I feel like a lot of times in books the writing is only pretty to be pretty and it doesn't really make sense, but in this one it makes sense and it just adds so much more to the story, and I love it. Lots of great metaphors, lots of great lines. We'll talk about the greatest line in this series on the next one. And I would just like to say this book is very simple compared to the other 2 books, and we'll talk about it more. Idiot! But in this book, it literally just centers around the trials and one of the 4, what are they called? Aspirants becoming the Emperor and the Blood Strike. And Laia is just trying to figure out where her brother is and trying to get him back. I really like it. It sets a very good base for this series and what it is. Okay, so now we're just gonna talk about my favorite parts in this book. I'm not going to talk about all of them because it's going to be way too much in this video. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the graduation scene. This graduation scene was so good. It filled me with so much euphoria, and it felt like I was there with those characters. You know, when Elias, Zach, Marcus, and Helene are called up, it's so grand, and I loved it so much. All of the trials were so well written, and I loved it. I felt the intensity and the fear within the characters, within Elias and Helene. I loved it so much. And can I say, the most underrated thing in this whole book, to me at least, is the transition into the trial of cunning. Beautiful. I will forever scream out into the void that this is the best part in this book, because Elisha's just walking down the corridors like filled with his thoughts, and then all of a sudden everything just shifts around him, and you can see it and you can feel it, and then it just transitions into this whole beautiful thing, and I love it so much. Like, if you've already read this book, go read that part again. Like, my soul has left my body. I love it so much. The Moon Festival, obviously, how can this not be anyone's favorite part? I mean, wholesomeness all around. It's so gorgeous. We would love to know what Elias said in Sedis. Another scene that I really liked was the duel between Helene and Elias. Yes, it kind of falls into the romance a little bit at the end, but honestly, the way it was written, where it was kind of this dance with them, it's so gorgeous. I am a sucker for good fight scenes. Fantastic. And then the last scene that I want to talk about, and that was one of my favorites, was when Elias is already locked up and Kiris goes to visit him. Really like this scene. It really takes away the cold outer shell of the Commandant, and we see a lot more of her character, albeit not a lot, but we understand her character just a tiny bit more. Again, doesn't excuse all the shitty things that she's done, and it's a very heartbreaking scene. So that is it for An Ember in the Ashes. Let's move on to the next one, which is A Torch Against the Night. I love this book so much. Honestly, I always forget how much I love this book because my hatred for Keenan blinds me every time I finish this. So yeah, honestly, really love it. The third time was when I actually really cried. I kind of teared up the second time, but then the first time I was kind of meh. And yes, we get Helene's point of view in this book. I love it so much. Oh my god. Talking about characters first again in this book, Laya, she's starting to grow. You know, at the end of Ember, she really starts to break that surface of being this strong person and being a leader. Really loved it. Love that she said fuck off Keenan and went with Elias. Best choice of her life. Yes. Fantastic. And then again, I love this growth within the entire book with her character. In this book, she starts to kind of fall back into that weaker character when Keenan comes along. Keenan makes her feel like shit and manipulates the fuck out of her. What an asshole. And this causes Laya to fall back into that, you know, weaker, backseat kind of character. But I really love at the end, before she realizes who Keenan is, she understands what Keenan is doing to her, and she feels why am I feeling like I'm weak? You know, I didn't feel like this when I was with Elias. I love that there's that self-realization of that, and she literally came back up and fucking took her role as a leader and being the strong girl that she is. Love it so much. Elias, still so sad. I honestly love him. I always feel so sad for him. He always has to do the things that he doesn't want to do. He always has to become the person that he doesn't want to be in order to keep the people that he loves safe. And can this boy ever just catch a break? What I realized about this book with Laya and Elias. So Laya, she is a character who thrives off of the support and words of encouragement of the people around her, and that's definitely okay. You know, sometimes we just need that extra push together, because sometimes our own words are never enough to really get us to the point where we want to be. And for Elias, what I realized in this book is that he is someone who though he can't have what he wants, he'll help others to become who they want. And we definitely see this dynamic between Elias and Laya, where he is constantly telling her, you can make the choice, you get to make the choice, I'm helping you, I'm not the one who's like supposed to make all the choices, you're the one who's going to make all the choices, and like I'm gonna empower the fuck out of you. Yes, love it so much. But back onto Elias as a character, just fantastic, love him. Yeah, that's it. For Helene, I love that we got her perspective. She is just such a great character. And I read a post about Laya and Helene and saying that it's okay to compare their storylines because they are very similar to each other, but then it kind of goes in the opposite way, where Laya starts in the beginning as a weak character and has to really build herself up, when Helene is already an established strong character and she gets broken down and she now has to like figure out a way how to get up from that. I'll leave that post down below because I loved that kind of like analysis of their characters. Really good, way better than what I'm gonna say about their characters. So yeah, definitely go check that out. But kind of going off of that, Helene starts in this book as being already like kind of beaten down, but then she's like still kind of keeping this tough exterior, still keeping her Helene persona. And we see her progress with making mistakes as being Bloodstrike and kind of overestimating some certain things. And then at the end, we truly see her break. It's so sad, but I just love the development with her character in this book, especially because she wasn't a main character in the first book. Really loved that we got to see that depth within her character in this book. So moving on to romances. So Elias and Laya. A lot of people say that their relationship is insta-lovey, and you know what? I'm not gonna deny it. It is kind of insta-lovey, but I think that it kind of falls like just like a step back from it, because in the first book, Elias is infatuated with Laya. He's like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. Obviously, she's gorgeous. And that's sort of the infatuation we see with him. But then also, we're looking at Elias's character arc. He wants to stop being cruel and wants to stop living by the Empire. And it's really hard to step back from this, being someone who has always been loyal to the Empire and doing his duty. It's really hard to step away from it and change, especially when the consequences are like really high and can even lead to his death. And so I feel like when Elias first sees Laya, she's struggling. She is the slave for his mother, and he feels so disgusted with it, but then he can't like really do anything about it because it will cause him a lot of consequences. So I feel like the relationship aspect of it in Elias's view is that Laya is someone he can protect, and not like protect as in I'm a really big dude and I can like really like protect this really pretty and smaller girl who doesn't really have a lot of power. More like Laya is the first steps for Elias to changing the way he was or is. So then progressing with their relationship in this book, their relationship does grow a lot more. They're spending a lot of time alone in the desert, albeit Elias is always fainting and then waking up. They're in a situation where they have to run away, they have to depend on each other, and they really learn a lot more about each other. Throughout their time in the journey, they're dealing with a lot of hardships and trouble, and from there, they get to really know each other and know each other's weaknesses and see each other's vulnerabilities. Within that, their attraction grows deeper because they now can lean and depend on each other without a second thought. Both Laya and Elias are characters who care so much and sometimes too much, and like that's the best thing about them. I really love the progression in this book. Okay, so let's move on to side characters. Kind of did it out of order, but it's okay. Let's talk about Kiris. More of her characters being revealed. She's still a fucking bitch. She's way more evil in this book. It is terrifying. She kills innocent people and she causes this whole genocide and massacre. It's fucking crazy. But I do like the layers that we start to peel off from her character. Still a very well written character, still kind of in the dark in this book. Moving on to Keenan, still an asshole, but I do kind of like sympathize with him when he talks about his family and losing his family. And I really like that build up and that kind of like subtle hint of who he actually is. You know, overall, manipulative asshole, fuck Keenan. Talk about Marcus. Still an asshole, but I do see his strength with being an emperor and his kind of like, what is it? plans or something. You do kind of see his mental decline and his emotional decline. Moving on to Avitas. Definitely the first time I read this, I really hated his guts, and it was really hard to trust him at the end when he starts to flip a new side. I don't know how that works, but you understand what I mean. But reading it the second and third time, you really start to understand his character a little bit more. Yes, first impressions are everything, and the first impression that we get of Avitas is that he's beating the shit out of Helene, and we already have this connection with Helene, and so we have this different character, Avitas, who's beating the shit out of Helene, and we're like, we fucking hate that dude. But then rereading it again and seeing the scenes that he is in, we start to really see who he is. Because in the beginning, we're given kind of like the basis of who he is. He works for the Commandant. He's the spy for the Commandant. He works for Marcus. He works for the Empire. And then in that scene where Avitas runs into Elias and Laia, he kind of looks at them and then they get scared, but then he walks away, and then it's revealed that he knew that that was Elias, but then he still didn't choose to like out them. And so with those certain scenes, you see him not acting in the way we would think he acts. And the first part where we kind of start to see more of him and who he actually is when he talks to Helene about Elias. And at first you can see this is kind of leverage for him, but then you can tell his intentions are genuine. And then at the end, when he reveals that he only took on this role as a spy for the Commandant is to get closer to Elias because they're half-brothers, you start to really kind of understand Avitas and see his character a little bit more other than this cruel interrogator. And when he reveals that he's Elias's half-brother, we can start to draw some similarities from that. We can see that their motivations are very similar. I'm not saying that they are the same character because they most definitely are not. They both have a similar wanting of being a good person. We all know this about Elias, and then we know that about Avitas later as it is revealed. Where they kind of diverge in that wanting is that Elias wants nothing to do with the Empire, and Avitas still wants to stand by the Empire and be loyal to it. So really polarizing thoughts about his character in this one. Okay, so moving on to the plot of this book. Again, writing was well done, really pretty, loved it so much, and we got that amazing quote where Elias dedicates his mantra to Laia, and it is the most beautiful thing ever. It is top tier literature, freaking amazing. I love it so much. I will forever cry about it. So about the plot of this book, I found that it was really starting to be more complex, and we saw this with Helene and Cain and their walk, I guess, where Cain takes her to the Illustrian house and they see the little plaque, I think, and Cain tells Helene, like, what do you see, you know? And this is where Helene really starts to question like the Empire and really starts to see like how cruel it can be. Really like that. And I love this kind of grayness where you don't know who is the good guy, who's the bad guy. You know, there's no real pinpoint into bad guy, good guy. And I really love that. Love the complexity that this is starting to really open up to. Okay, but talking about favorite parts that I want to talk about that were my favorites were obviously the scene where Elias dedicates his mantra to, or mantra, I don't know how you say it, his mantra to Laia in the wagon. Best scene ever in this entire series. I don't even have to read Sky Beyond the Storm to know that this will forever be the best line and the best scene out of the entire series. Again, the scene where Cain takes Helene to the Illustrian house that was burned down. Love that scene. Again, the complexity within it and how it adds to the world. Really love it. The storyteller stage, fantastic. I love that you felt the energy. You can feel the whole thing building up into something really great and grand. Very heartbreaking what happens at the end of it. Oh my god, very heartbreaking, but overall really well done, really well written. Loved it. And then the scene where Laia apologizes to Elias, so heartbreaking. And this is when you like have that moment with those two, and I love it so much. Okay, and then going back to when Cain and Helene see the Illustrian house, that's where Helene kind of starts to question the Empire. But then once she sees Kyrus killing all those scholars, she thinks in her head, is this what the Empire has really become? Or has it always been this way? And I love that Helene has that kind of question in her head, because it really starts to evolve her character more. That's it for all the scenes that I want to talk about that were my favorite. Yeah, love this one. Let's jump into A Reaper at the Gates. Okay, so now we're on to the last book that we're going to talk about in this video. I'm really surprised at how many people thought this book was lackluster compared to the two, because this one has to be my favorite out of the three that are out right now. And I hate saying that, like, I have a favorite between the three, but like, I just love this one so much. I have such a deep attachment to it, and I think that's because we got rid of the stupid love triangles and we really start to see more of the characters and more of the complexity of the world and with the characters, and it is fantastic. I loved it so much. This one is definitely way darker than the first two, although the first two are really dark. This entire series is really dark, but this one just hit in such a different way because you're filled with so much hope, but then a lot of that gets knocked down and it hurts a lot. Okay, so back to talking about the characters. Laya in this one, she really starts to become this strong leader, and I love it. And I also do really love that she's hesitant about doing it. She's more distant from that role, but she still holds that position. I love that she's becoming more ruthless in this one. Love it. And I also love that she's still making mistakes in this one. Like, yes, mistakes are very dire and they're terrible, but it makes her character all the more realistic. She doesn't have any formal training in these sort of things, and so it would make sense for her character to make mistakes and to make assumptions. And it's something that I complained about in the past, about her making mistakes and her not being smart enough to understand all this. But after my third reread, I really started to see who she was as a character and see her as her own character rather than kind of like comparing her to like the other characters and their growth in their story. Let's go back to Elias. Elias, his chapters in this one weren't my favorite, but I do have such a deep appreciation for him now after this third reread. His chapters are so emotional and so sad, and we can see his progress from human into being the soul catcher, and it's so heartbreaking to see, especially because knowing who Elias is as a character, and he just wants to live a life of freedom and happiness and wants to live on his own terms, but then he can't do that when he's always stuck in these situations where if he doesn't confide to what he has to do, then the loved ones of him will suffer, and he doesn't want that, and so he submits to that role. And it's so sad for me to read and for Elias. And we can definitely see that push and pull at the end of Torch, but then more in this book where he has to figure out if he still wants to keep his humanity, but then let the people in the other world suffer where the people he loves are in that world, or be this emotionless entity and still keep the people that he loves safe. And so very sad. On to Helene, and her chapters were my favorite in this book, and I also feel like it's because she is the one dealing with the antagonist, because in Elias's chapters he does kind of deal with the antagonist, but it's more of like this other entity, and we don't really know much about that yet, so I think we're gonna see a lot more of that in Sky. And with Laya, she's kind of coming up with a plan on how to like resurrect her title, I guess, and it's more about her stopping the Nightbringer and coming up with the plan to do that. So for Helene, she's dealing with Marcus, she's dealing with Kira, she's dealing with the Nightbringer. She has all these like antagonists coming at her, and I feel like that's what really intrigued me about her chapters and what really made me love them. But other than that, I really loved her development with this one, because she was broken at the end of Torch, but then she kind of built herself up again, but then at the end of this she gets broken again, and it's like this vicious roller coaster for her, and I feel so sad for her. But again, it really does have to play within her character and her vulnerabilities, because she is a person who loves a lot, and that love often causes her a lot of consequences, and so we really see that in this book. So let's go on to side characters. Let's talk about Kiris. I don't know what she's up to. Still very in the dark about all of that. She's still a fucking bitch. I do love the meaning behind the tattoo on her back. So fucking genius. I read that and my jaw dropped. I was like, how could I not catch this? This was so genius and I love it. But now she's the Empress of the Empire. I am so nervous for The Sky Beyond the Storm because I don't know where the whole thing is gonna go and how it's gonna end. But moving on to the next character that we're gonna talk about is the Nightbringer. The Nightbringer. I don't hate him as much as I hate Keenan. They're both different characters to me. I feel like with the Nightbringer, there's a lot more layers and complexity to him. Although every time I saw him, I still really hated him, but I didn't hate him as much as I hated Keenan. Moving on to Marcus. Marcus, he doesn't really have a significant role in this book, but I do love seeing the development that we had with his character because his mental health really starts to decline, and it's kind of like a heartbreaking thing to see. Again, doesn't excuse him for all the shit that he's fucking done, and honestly his death was well deserved at the end. But I really love that Sabaa Tahir continued to grow his character and really develop him, and so his death wasn't just like he gets to die because he's a terrible person, you know. It felt more. It's getting dark, so I'm gonna turn on the lights. Hopefully that's better. Moving on to Livia. I feel like she is really going to become a prominent character in the fourth book. We can already see her strength in this book and a little bit in the second book. And so I'm really excited to see where she goes, especially, I don't know. I'm really excited for her character. I don't really have much to say about her other than I can really see the start of her own story and I love it. So another side character that I want to talk about is Musa. Oh, I love him so much. He's my favorite kind of character trope. He's got that hilarious front where he's always making these jokes and he's very straightforward with a lot of things, but then on the inside he's just a sad boy, and that's my favorite thing in the entire world. And honestly, I would sell my soul for a Musa and Nicola short story, or even a story of their own, because just explaining like their relationship and everything, so intriguing. Okay, last side character we're gonna talk about is obviously Avitas Harper. I fell in love with him in this book. It's very hard to explain his character in this one because of how he is in Torch. For this one, we really start to get to know who he is, although we don't really get a lot. The whole base is there for him, and I would really love to expand more on his character. I love that he's so smart and caring. I love him so much. Okay, now talking about the relationships in this one. So first talking about Elias and Laya. Their relationship is definitely more established where they have mutual feelings, but then they won't admit that they love each other or that they like each other. They're always like, but they're my friend, you know? Like, I really care for them. Okay. But then in this book, it does really start to kind of fall apart, especially towards the end when Elias starts to become this emotionless entity where she's kind of like, well, fuck you then. All that stuff. So heartbreaking, so sad, but I really do love their development and their kind of banter within this book. They still really care about each other, and they still really love each other, and I cry so much. Okay, but the fact that both of these characters simultaneously think about their future together and what their life would be is so wholesome, and you can't tell me that this couple doesn't slap, because they do. Moving on to our next couple, Helene and Avitas. This is definitely one of the more complicated ships, and I do understand people who don't like this couple because of how they started, where Avitas was interrogating Helene and she always kept this guard up around Avitas. But then again in Torch, we start to see this change in their relationship, and that's after she and him talk about Elias, where she expresses her feelings about Elias because she hadn't done that with anyone, and there was a little shift in their relationship within that scene. The shift in the relationship does continue on within the whole story, but then it never forgets the fact that Avitas had interrogated Helene. It's constantly being brought up by different characters, even Helene herself. And I think it's put in there to really emphasize that the relationship that's grown between the two of them is not going to be an easy one, and that there's still a lot of mending that needs to happen before they can actually take a step into being in a relationship. It's even brought up at the end of Reaper, and at this point in the book, it's already established that they both have mutual feelings towards each other that are romantic. And so I really like that there's a lot of emphasis on that part. Throughout this book, we can really see Helene leaning on Avitas and taking his advice and really confiding in him. And he's always there to support her and care for her. And I think with that dynamic, they really start to feel a sense of security and comfort within each other. I just really love that Helene is a more hot-headed person and Avitas is this more level-headed person, and they balance each other out so well. Okay, so moving on to the plot of this book. Again, the writing was really great. I love it so much. Again, a lot of great metaphors, a lot of great lines in this one. I will say I will cry when we read that scene where Elias tells Laia what he told her in the wagon before he left to go save her brother. It's gonna be a lot. And I also will cry my heart out when I read that scene where Avitas finally says the Bloodstrike's heart's name. Oh my god, we're building up to it and I can't wait for it. I'm so excited, yet I'm so sad and terrified and emotional about this whole thing. So talking about my favorite scenes, the beginning scene, not with the Nightbringer, but with Helene, Elias, and Elia in that house. Oh my god, it was so great because these characters have never really been in the same room together, and so we had that first scene with them, and after waiting 2 years for this book to come out and then reading that was just so satisfying. And even I think it's from Laia's perspective, she points out that it's like it feels like very like significant, like that moment with just the three of them in the room. And I love it. I love that scene in books where you have different perspectives and then they like all come together in this one moment, and it's so fantastic. Also the fact that Helene told Elias to not call her Bloodstrike, but then in this book she is just so hardened with grief and filled with so much rage. She tells Elias, don't fucking call me Helene, and he calls her Bloodstrike, and it makes me cry. It tears my heart apart because they're best friends, and I just wish that we got to see more of the best friend aspect within their relationship, because I felt like even in the first book it was already established that like someone likes someone between the two of them, and I just wanted that like pure good friendship. Also, we have that heart-to-heart with Helene and Laia where they talk about grief, and hits my heart so much. A couple of my favorite scenes were the small flirting scenes with Avitas and Helene. So wholesome, so good. That closet scene was great. The scene where she dressed in front of him, great. The ending scene where they kissed, fantastic. Oh my god, I have such a deep love for this couple, and I can't wait to read more about them in A Sky Beyond the Storm because I'm so excited. Oh my god. Another scene that I really liked was when Helene and Marcus went to the Augur's Cave, and then she basically tells Cain, like, you fucking did this to me. I did everything you fucking told me to do. And he's like, whoa, calm the fuck down. And he basically tells her to check her privilege, because let me read the fucking line to you because it literally, like, so great. And I do love these scenes where certain characters will kind of check the main characters, because the main characters do sometimes make rash statements and actions, and I love that other characters are kind of like, think it through first, bitch. I don't know if that made sense, but you get what I mean, right? Found it. So basically the line goes, but you are a paragon of perfection. Cain tilts his head, appearing genuinely curious. You live and breathe and eat and sleep on the backs of those less fortunate. Your entire existence is due to the oppression of those you view to be lesser. But why you, Bloodstrike? Why did fate see fit to make you the oppressor instead of the oppressed? What is the meaning of your life? And I just really love that line because, again, it's basically telling Helene to check her privilege. Another scene is when Helene brings the fleet back. So fucking climactic. I fucking loved it. And when she came back, everyone was screaming, Bloodstrike, Bloodstrike. Euphoria within that scene. Also, when Laia goes to see the King of Edessa, go off, girl. She killed it. She is fantastic. We love Laya. She is like a fucking firework. Also, another scene between Helene and Avitas is when she heals him. She's like, oh my god, he likes me? No shit, girl. And then the entire ending was like my favorite ever. So heartbreaking. We have Livy, who's pregnant, coming back and then going into labor, having a baby. Laya stealing the ring, thinking it's the last piece of the star, but it's not. And you're like, holy fuck. Marcus dies, Elias arrives, and Helene thinks that he's there to save them, but then he just leaves after. So heartbreaking. Helene fighting by herself, thinking she's gonna die out there, but then the Nightbringer comes and takes her mask. And then we find out that Cook is Laya's mother. Oh my god, the whole revelation of that scene, like the subtlety and like the hints that we were given, really well done, honestly. And I don't know how I didn't pick up on it. I'm the actual idiot here. And then Cook and Laya coming to save Helene in the end, but then Cook sacrificing herself to save her daughter and Helene. Oh my god, I cried my eyes out at the end of this book and at the end of that scene. Holy shit, my heart was so empty and it hurt so much. And of course, one of my favorite scenes is with Laya and Helene, and they finally start to like grow this friendship, and I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. I was waiting for this. Throughout these entire books, I was waiting for that friendship to blossom, and it's finally blossoming, and I can't freaking wait for it. And that is it for this terrible and chaotic review. I know I wasn't really coherent and all that stuff, but that is it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you're still here by the end, thank you. Let me know what your thoughts were about these books, and I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye.